So I was saying that we're sorry that we are starting delayed, but the last couple of months, I've seen this series of conversations on, the history of our country, the policy arena, what we have been trying to get right through the years. And in the last 2 months, particularly, we focused on healthcare. We have had the privilege of having Mazi Sambo with us on the previous one of these episodes in the Great Escape series, as we call it, with Professor Ita Lambo and others. But today we want to focus primarily on the manufacture, control, and distribution of pharmaceutical products, which really is very critical to being able to ensure that we achieve this great escape from misery that has been the lot of most societies since the germ theory of disease um, was established, and medicaments to help deal with those have helped to improve the quality of life that people live, allowing them to better produce and to grow economically. And this is why, obviously, Angus Deaton's book is titled The Great Escape: Health, Wealth, and the Origins of Inequality. Now, I think out of question in welcoming the very distinguished team that we have today, and I will go straight to the Director General of NAFDAC, Professor Mujia Adeyeye, is why are we more peculiarly challenged in encouraging the manufacture of pharmaceuticals, the effectiveness of distribution, controlling faking, and it just seems like we are jumping from one crisis to another crisis. What might be responsible in your experience, Professor Day?
Thank you very much, Professor Utomi. The challenges were many. I will use were many in terms of drug manufacturing, control, distribution in Nigeria. It is as a result of a compounded set of problems, partly due to bad policies, partly due to bad policies in the past, partly due to weakness of the regulatory system. If you don't have a strong regulatory system and you have bad government policies, all these could contribute to challenges or problems in local manufacturing, control, distribution of pharmaceuticals. Let me just start with bad government policies. Before NAFDAC was started, there used to be a policy where anybody can buy medicines and ship to Nigeria. Whether you know anything about drug or not, you can, or you could. And of course, it's still happening today. So we found ourselves in a position where people started trading in medicines. And if you are not trained as a pharmacist to know the effect of bad medicines on health, you can just manufacture or ask somebody to manufacture anything they want. So that policy is still around till today. And this was started before NAFDAC was created in 1993. Another bad policy is from 2011 to 2018, NAFDAC was removed from the ports. And it was a shock to me. Maybe a month after my resumption, they told me that NAFDAC is not at the ports. I said, no, you must be joking. NAFDAC is supposed to control the importation, the exportation of so many regulated products, and it's not at the ports. So those 7 years were years where cabals were formed, where anybody from anywhere in the world can bring anything into the country, where tramadol became a high commodity in Nigeria because there was nobody at the ports to control. So that is another challenge. The other challenge that is very present with us now, it is the fact that the local manufacturers import everything except water. And I've often said that to be a local manufacturer in Nigeria, you must be a patriot. We import 70% of our medicines and manufacture about 30%. We're supposed to be importing not more than 30 or even 20% because we cannot manufacture everything locally.
Why is this so the case? Because it would seem logical that if we could produce many of those things locally, we should be able to get ahead of things like supply chain crisis created by, say, the kind of COVID-19 lockdown that we have just experienced, that is put many pharmaceutical companies in very difficult positions, chasing raw materials around the place. What has been the major impediment from local manufacturers being able to deepen their engagement?
I couldn't hear you, Prof. If you could
repeat
it again, I couldn't hear you, sir.
All right. What has been the main reason why manufacturers don't try to produce more locally? Because it should be logical that if it can, it's safer to do it locally, given the fact that supply chain crisis as we had this year would be very disruptive of importing from abroad.
Yes, it's a good question that you have. Because of the proliferation of imported products, where a trader can go to a country like China or India and say, okay, put only 50% active ingredients in the formulation, when it's supposed to be 100%, where quality is compromised. The products are brought in very cheap compared to the local manufacturer who will want to do the right thing. So that is part of the reason. Another reason is the fact that we, as a country, we do not protect our trade. The pharmaceutical trade must be protected. Many of the products that are imported are also being made locally. However, because of competition, the cheaper imported products, whether they are good for health or not, make it very, very difficult for the local manufacturers to compete in the market. But we are changing that around. We have submitted a proposal to increase the prohibition list of medicines that should be brought into the country. Before we had only about 17. We want to make it like 70 because we have the capacity to manufacture more than what we are manufacturing now. And it is easier to regulate local manufacturers, which we have been doing, if more of our products are manufactured locally. I mentioned a challenge of NAFDAC regulatory system. NAFDAC regulatory system was weak. What I've been doing since I came was to make it stronger. If the regulatory system is weak, the manufacturing sector will be weak. So what NAFDAC has been doing now is using global best practices. We are going through audits. This is our third year now, or second year actually, of going through global benchmarking audit. Because you cannot give what you don't have. If we don't have a quality management system, we cannot advise a manufacturer to have a quality management system. So last year we got certified for quality management system ISO 9000. We are going through WHO global benchmarking audit as we speak. And it has 287 sub-indicators, requirements that we need to make, that we need to meet. We have been working around the clock to make those requirements. This is for level 3. It is levels 1 to 4. We want to make level 3 so that whatever we are learning, we are also imparting on our local manufacturers. So the weak regulatory system in the past of NAFDAC contributed to all these challenges that we just said. Thank you so much.
Sam Owabunwa, who has been at the manufacturing end, who has played in economic development, engagements to develop a strategy for economic development in the country. Namazi, where do you think the strategy is wrong in the pharmaceutical sector that has made the possibilities of a strong domestic? I mean, when we started out, the Indias and Indonesias and the Turkeys, from who many of the drugs are being imported today, not to add China, we are at pretty similar levels, some even behind Nigeria. When Pfizer came into Nigeria, just after independence, I mean, there was a lot of expectation and hope that a domestic industry with in a country with so many people would grow rapidly. What went wrong?
Thank you, Pat. Let me greet my seniors in this panel, Dr. Mafo, my past president, and my DG, Professor Adeyeye, and all the very distinguished fellows of the Pharmaceutical Society and distinguished professionals, Nigerians, and all. I'm speaking to you from Atlanta, Georgia, where I had to wake up slightly earlier for a Sunday morning to be on this panel. But I'm glad that the work you started is going on. And I'm thankful that these very distinguished people are able to join, because without these kind of conversations that are cross-cutting, I mean, so often pharmacists are talking to themselves, maybe healthcare professionals are talking, regulators are talking to themselves. And when we get this kind of panel, when a normal civilian like you is participating in the discussions of healthcare, it means we can make impact. Your question is pointed because it's been a puzzle for me and for many, that our country got to the point where we began to dream dreams of increasing local production. That's what made government with the drug health policy and drug policy to set targets way back 2000 and thereabout on how we should reach certain targets. But I think we are facing three issues. First is the domestic operating environment. We have a domestic operating environment that is not supportive to value addition generally. It's not supportive to manufacturing, not just even pharmaceuticals. That environment, that philosophical base of a country that is bent on increasing and supporting local industry to prosper is still not at its primary point. Because if it were, every problem that you properly focus on gets solved. So the domestic environment, beyond the philosophical base, is also the issue of poor infrastructural base, because pharmaceutical manufacturing is like any other business. There has to be those factors that drive profitability that will interest investors. So we have a domestic environment. It's a little bit hostile. The competitive deficit in terms of infrastructure, where we have to provide everything. I mean, it's very, very, if you check our cost profile, cost of energy, and cost of transportation.
You know, where I want to take this conversation, and we'll get to it, is that I still come back to this tripartite approach to development, where if we agree a general strategy for sectors of the economy, all the players, public sector, private sector, even the NGO sectors can, you know, work in a certain way together to achieve the goal of the country. And I will come to how maybe these conversations can help us achieve this. But let me just go to Dr. Emafo. We're very honored and pleased to have with us Dr. Philip Emafo, who for many, many years was in the middle of the evolution of all these policies and how the sector tried to evolve. Perhaps from the benefit of hindsight, can we learn something about the things that we did wrong that we can begin to fix, to give us a chance, a second chance at rebuilding this sector of our economy?
For inviting me on this program. I want to say that the issues that we are discussing now are of great importance to Nigerians. Pharmacy is one of the most regulated professions in the country, with so many laws. Unfortunately, we do not back up these laws with adequate regulation. That is enforcement of the laws. You may increase the number of personnel as much as you want, but the personnel will have to be committed. And if they are not committed, then of course you continue to have a lot of problems about drug distribution and manufacturing. The DG NAFDAC talked about manufacturing drugs in the country, and that the only thing that is added to things that are imported is water. But this water also that we use in Nigeria is very expensive, because the manufacturers have to have the borehole to produce this water, and they have to treat this water so that it is of good quality to be used in pharmaceutical production. Then local manufacture, you have to have the infrastructure, you have to have electricity. Now many of the manufacturers are dependent on generators, and you are increasing the price of fuel for generating the electricity that we use. That increases cost. So what really, and as Sir Ohabuwan said, these are problems that are faced by other manufacturers. The government has to be serious about running the country properly. Most of our problems is because the government is not serious about running the country. And I doubt, again, if they want good advisors, because if they have good advisors and they listen to the advisors, then things may move forward. The problems we are discussing now were there when I was the director of pharmaceutical services. And I left the Federal Ministry of Health 1988, and the same problems are still there and being repeated over and over again. Something needs to be done. Again, the staffing, as I said, you have to look at the staffing, and you have to look at their commitment. Some years ago, I was made the chairman of NAFDAC, and I was on a plane from Lagos to Abuja to attend a meeting of NAFDAC. And somebody sat next to me and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm so. Oh, he said, "The organization you head is one of the most corrupt organizations in the country." I said, "Really?" But that's the truth. You see, the DG may be working as hard as she can, but she needs to have her staff to be on board, to be as committed as she is. Because if there is no commitment, there will be no corruption. There will be a lot of corruption, and this creates problems. Government on its own has to do its bit, provide the infrastructure to enable people to manufacture. Even when you are importing, even when you are manufacturing in Nigeria, you need to import the raw materials. And yet, if government is serious about the petrochemical industry, with the crude oil we have, if work is done on it, we can produce the chemicals here that could be used for local manufacture. But until that is done, almost all the raw materials, not almost, all the raw materials will have to be imported.
Yeah, we had a
problem.
Just to show that these things are possible, where government, having invested in many of these petrochemical businesses and everything was not running, made what must be a very wise decision to sell off the petrochemicals plant in somewhere near Port Harcourt. Indorama took over. Today is an enormously profitable organization. And so the question really that must come to all of us is, suppose we as stakeholders, as citizens, agree that, look, we cannot continue just to complain and complain about our country. That is our country also. These characters that come from nowhere as birds of passage for a period of time cannot continue to depress us. Why don't we do something? And I'll turn to Claire Masha here, because Claire has been involved in many of these conversations through the years. Now, Claire, if we were to pretend that there was no government, what can be done that can make a system run more efficiently? I say pretend because we really can't.
Really?
What creative ways can we get around these lamentations?
Thank you, Prof, and thank you to my senior colleagues who have spoken earlier. I mean, we all agree that healthcare in Nigeria is very fragmented. We play very small, but as we talk about the Herculean challenges, there are lots of opportunities. I spent my last 6 years being the president of the Healthcare Federation of Nigeria, and my major role was advocacy. We cannot work in a lacuna, but we need an enabling environment for government to provide that enabling environment for the private sector to thrive. So to my mind and to the mind of the members of the Healthcare Federation of Nigeria and now the West African Healthcare Federation, the only way forward for access to quality healthcare is by public-private partnership. And that starts first by creating the enabling policy and regulatory framework. We have our regulators here, we have the president of the Pharmaceutical Society, and I think that for me is the first step in the right direction. If we took this back a decade ago, the regulator sat on one side and the private sector sat on one side, and we were actually at different dipoles. What has happened over the last decade is that close collaborative effort where the private sector has a seat at the table with policy formulation, where there's a regular and open dialogue between the regulator and the private sector. And we can see a change, probably not as fast as it should be, but we can see a change in the policy direction. So I think one is we need to create that enabling environment. We need to keep the dialogue open. We need to not only engage with the regulators, but we also need to engage with all the major people that will make the laws and engage or formulate policies. And that's the first. The second is that we also have to understand the power that the private sector brings. In Nigeria and indeed West Africa, 60% of healthcare is provided by the private sector. But unfortunately, we play very small. People finish pharmacy school and think of me, myself, and I. They want, 100% of a very small business, instead of thinking of disruptive, innovative methodologies of providing services in pharmacy. And I think we ourselves here need to learn from this conversation. We are quite myopic in healthcare. And I think, again, over the last couple of years, we have realized, especially with COVID-19, that we cannot do it alone, that we need collaborative efforts with non-health players. Without health, there's no wealth. And you see a lot of more conversations happening outside health. The next issue that we have in healthcare, as in pharmaceuticals, that we need access to long-term capital. To be able to change the narrative of going from 70% of importation to 70% local production and drug security, we need access to patient capital. We have no dedicated healthcare funding until this year, where we got 100 billion naira from the central bank, and that was triggered by COVID. But 100 billion is nothing. We need multiples of billions of dollars to be able to change the narrative. So access to affordable long-term financing is that. We need to start investing in research and development. Having all, 90, 95% of our pharmaceuticals dependent on importation. We need to go back into what you would call, if I remember in business school, backward integration, where we get our excipients, our tapioca starch, our active pharmaceutical ingredients produced in country. But we need government, again, to create that enabling environment and make sure that when we create these drugs, as the DG of NAFDAC said, that there's an incentive for local production over importation. Importation is the easy way out, and you have vested interest, a lot of vested interest in people who prefer to import over that. So we need to go and learn from what they do in the oil industry. In the oil industry, they have the local content. We need local content for pharmaceutical industries, where if you are 20, 30% higher than an imported drug, the government, being the major procurer, will buy locally. We also need to make sure that our donors, where we get a lot of import money from, buy Nigerian. We now have at least 5 WHO certified laboratories in country. We should be able to buy our own pharmaceuticals, our antiretroviral drugs, our antimalarials. This must be encouraged and should form part of the policy. So just in a nutshell, because there's a lot to talk about.
Well, thank you
very much.
Whether we manufacture or we import, distribution is a major issue for the industry. And so let me go to that before I come back to a strategy, general strategy for this.
And ask
because I know that a few years ago there was an effort that I remember he was involved in
to find cooperative ways of distributing pharmaceuticals that can create the scale economies and provide some of the guarantees of quality and all of that. What have been the challenges in organizing these things, and how can that creation of a network that will provide the volume to get away from the fragmented kind of industry that Claire was speaking to, how can those be achieved?
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. And I want to say I'm extremely very privileged to be on this very panel to discuss with very revered senior colleagues of mine. We have Dr. Mafo, our esteemed DG of NAFDAC, my good friend Samuel Huabonwa, the PSN president. Yes, we have listened to all the speakers, and I'm very much impressed with the level of cross-fertilization of ideas that is being put forward. Like you rightly asked me, what we are really pursuing at that very time is to have a coordinated wholesale center in response to federal government initiative to have where we could have pharmaceutical products properly distributed in environment with all the regulatory agencies there to have an eye on what every person is doing. That of Lagos were bedeviled a lot of challenges, but to God be the glory, through the assistance of the Registrar of Pharmacists Council, the Minister of Health, we were able to overcome those challenges, and we're now on track to have that dream translated into reality.
Okay.
Prof, I hope you heard me loud and clear.
Yes, yes, I did hear you. What is the real goal of this process? Does it create co-opetition where people can be competing and cooperating at the same time?
No.
And then provide scale?
No, we just want to have, it is not peculiar to Lagos. You know, presently we do have open market centers in some areas, Lagos, Aba, Kano, Onitsha, and all other places. So federal government in its wisdom felt there was a need to have a proper environment where these businesses could be situated so that those who are doing any business there, we know for a fact that they have the eyes of regulatory agencies over their shoulders so that to be in total compliance with the relevant laws of the land. So that is the essence of making sure that pharmaceuticals are sold in an environment where all the relevant laws are strictly adhered to. That's the essence of having such wholesale centers. It's to be in Lagos, it's going to be in Aba, it's going to be in Kano, and other centers too, as approved by the government of the day.
Okay, let me turn to the registrar who you mentioned, Mr. Elijah Mohammed. One of the big challenges when you have a professional grouping of this nature is that, not challenges, one of the big advantages is that the group can organize itself such that it puts pressure on all the appropriate key institutions to ensure that things run as they should run. How have you fared in the profession in trying to ensure that you can bring all the stakeholders together and really agree what is in the best interest of everybody, win-win, so that the sector can grow?
The Nigerian people can get the benefit of a thriving pharmaceutical industry that we can turn to
help us all escape the misery that we are living in without the appropriate pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, thank you very much. I once again to thank you for inviting me to this program. I also want to recognize my leaders and elders in the profession. I would like to bring to the notice of all that the federal government, as far back as 2009, put in place the Presidential Committee on Pharmaceutical Sector Reforms. And that committee was constituted in 2003 to develop strategies towards sanitization of the drug distribution system in the country. The fallout of that was a recommendation of a national drug distribution guidelines for the country, which was approved by Mr. President then, and then adopted by the National Council on Health Development was completed in 2010 in earnest. But however, we discovered that a section of the stakeholders were not carried along, because the essence of it all was to ensure a well-regulated drug distribution channel in the country, and then they closed down on open drug market. This open drug market we all know, constitutes one of the major source of drug in the country. And all sorts of things are going on there. And if you are to close them down without making provision for the individuals there, the 20% of the individuals in the open drug market, and if you are to dismantle them, either to get drugs, recognize us to replace those sort of drugs are coming out of the country, they're registered. So all sorts of things go in there, and it's a big threat to.
Yeah. Okay. While we deal with the bandwidth issues there, let me return to Professor Adeye on this subject. Most Nigerians on the streets, let's use that language, the bottom of the pyramid, depend on patent medicine stores for their entire health care. I mean, seeing a doctor is ruled out completely. And they just go to some patent medicine person in the corner who just prescribes anything, gives them all kinds of drugs that are not, the efficacy cannot be assured, and all of that. Can the industry not, with the leadership of NAFDAC, mount an education campaign to the citizen? Because human beings are human beings, they want to be okay, and they go to what they can see, the only thing they can afford. Both an education campaign and a way of being able to organize lower cost drugs. I know that the crisis that the essential drug list created many years ago, I wrote a case study on that, when the idea, coming out of WHO to essentially prescribe for purchase by government institutions of generics that are much lower priced, that can do the same thing as some of the branded products. Unfortunately, the implementation of that whole thing, instead of being a minimum list, became a list that chased out a lot of manufacturers. Above and beyond that, what can be done, industry group, with you providing some leadership to do massive public education, television campaigns, so that the ordinary person doesn't think you are trying to prevent them from getting well, but they are trying to make sure that they get better in a way that can be managed,
Thank you, Prof. I want to also recognize the previous speakers. NAFDAC's mandate is to control the importation, exportation, manufacture, distribution, among what the other mandates are. I mentioned that weak regulatory system contributed to where we are. If NAFDAC was to be in charge of distribution or controlling, not in charge, controlling the distribution of medicines, NAFDAC did not do what he was supposed to do in the past. PCN and NAFDAC are the major regulators of drug distribution. We do the upstream and part of the downstream, and PCN does the downstream among the professionals in practice settings and so on. But we didn't do our job. So I mentioned that you cannot give what you don't have. Now we are acquiring what we need as a regulator. I mentioned 287 indicators that are required of us. Many of them have a lot to do with drug distribution. If we don't meet that target, we will not get to that level. So we work hard round the clock with PCN, because part of this auditing includes PCN too. I think they have maybe about 30 or whatever out of the 287 indicators, because it is realized that both agencies must be up and running in terms of regulation. Our elder, Dr. Emafo, mentioned corruption.
I was going to come to that, yes.
Yes, mentioned corruption, and it is real. In NAFDAC, I've been going from state to state via virtual meetings, from zone to zone and states, talking about transactional corruption. Meaning, if you don't give me this, I will not do my regulatory activity. That has decreased significantly, because part of our own quality management system is to make people think customer first, agency second. If you are thinking of customer first, you will not be thinking of your pocket. We have continued to improve along that line. But our culture is also challenged with the sense that if I don't give something to somebody, that person will not do the job. So it is not just one-sided. It is two-sided, both the regulator and the client. And that is part of what we are trying to do, to make sure that we stem corruption. About 40-something years ago, FDA was in a bad place. If you cannot compare the corruption that I'm talking about now with what happened at the FDA. But some people went to jail because of it. And it went into, they stated their problems in front of the Congress, meaning National Assembly here. And the government now understood better what a regulatory agency is. We just got approved, NAFDAC just got approved for more vehicles last week, and we're going to buy more. Before I joined NAFDAC, companies will send vehicles to come and inspect. They will send vehicles to NAFDAC to come and pick the inspectors. You can figure it out that there is no way you can avoid corruption. So when I came, I said, we don't need vehicles from companies. How do we do that?
Sorry to intervene. You mentioned examples from the FDA.
Yes, sir.
And we have even more powerful examples in terms of dealing with these issues from Hong Kong, from Singapore. How are we making an effort to see what we can learn from these people who overcame these? Because these are existential issues. They're huge crises for all of us. And they've become systemic. They are part of culture in our country. But people need to be helped to realize that they are doing more damage to themselves, even their own selves, those people taking that bribe. Because it could be your cousin that will be the victim tomorrow. It could be you even. How do we massively educate and train to, if Hong Kong and Singapore can go from where they were to where they are in terms of those, surely it's possible for Nigeria. What are we looking at doing?
It is possible, sir. And your suggestion about regulator and the clients or the private sector coming together, extremely important. That is part of what we have thought of in NAFDAC. It will come, but at the same time, as a regulator, you don't want to keep rubbing shoulders with the regulated, because some people may say, oh, it's because they've gotten money from company A, that is why they are doing this together. But if the template is made very, very plain, that this is PSN, for example, or the Association of Industrial Pharmacists coming together as a group with NAFDAC, then it doesn't look as if we are playing the tune with another company. But it is something that we can do to educate our people. More people get ill because of medicine, abuse of medicine or bad medicines. My own relatives have been, affected by taking anti-malarials that have real problems, and the outcomes were bad. the outcomes were bad. That is why we need to look again at who actually is importing medicines into the country. If you don't have a clue about how drug works, how can you know when you are mixing bad things together and counterfeiting medicine? So this joint effort, we're going to look at it, more keenly in the agency to educate our people. NAFDAC and Your Health comes up twice a week on NTA and TVC. That we're going to start doing more and more of that. We've been doing a lot. We just have a lot of problems. The level of education in our country is about 56, illiteracy rather, it's about 56%. So when you don't even, people cannot even read what is on the label, that's a problem. So we have to start, or use an holistic approach to make sure that,
thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
This is so important. As you recall, I might be letting a cat out of the bag, that we're privileged to live together at the University of Nigeria, yourself, myself, and my dear, very good late friend, Dora Kunyili. I recall a conversation with Dora years ago about consequence of fake drugs to a relation and the way it impacted her. And so these are issues that are very personal, that we all need to respond to in terms of how we generally try to educate players in the sector. But I think that we need a holistic strategy for the whole sector. And this is where I want to turn back to Sam. Sam Owabungwa, as you know clearly, Sam, my idea of how you can develop an economy is based on the concept of latent comparative advantage. That we choose particular sectors that we think are critical, in which we also have factor endowments. In the case of pharmaceuticals, a lot of the inputs are things in which we have factor endowments. If we got the appropriate investment, got an industrial policy that protected that sector for a period of time to become globally competitive and all of that. And as you also know, I keep talking about this tripartite approach to development. What can the industry do now? Now that we are all talking as partners, get elements from civil society who will be advocates for the industry, get government, the regulators, get those who are manufacturing, those, and everybody together. And as my favorite example is Park in South Korea, President Park. All the stakeholders will sit on the table. What must we do to achieve this goal? What do you need as manufacturers? And they will say, oh, the banks have to do this. The bankers are sitting there. Bankers, how will you do this? Oh, well, government has to do this. And everybody agrees. And then committed, everybody goes forward with implementing this. Is it not possible, Sam, to engage like this for this so important sector? That everybody knows their bit, their expectation, and people hold each other accountable to ensure that we can achieve these goals.
Well, thank you, Pat. This journey has started. Last year, we held a roundtable, which PSM mediated, which brought all the stakeholders, including CPN, NAFDAC, PCN, the academia, the practicing pharmacists, industrial pharmacists, everybody on the table. We had a roundtable. And while we looked at these issues, and we began to set timelines for action, because talk is what we've been talking, much of action hasn't happened. So we set timeline when we should bring down, for example, the local domestic production percentage, to increase it to about 50%, instead of the 30% DG NAFDAC made reference to, when we should reduce, delete certain products from our import list, both finished and also raw materials. We've set some timelines. The critical ingredient is what DG NAFDAC, or what we're doing here. The industry is managed by two main agencies, PCN and NAFDAC. And they have begun to talk. In fact, it has happened that in our constitution of the PSN, the new constitution, we have made it mandatory for a meeting that will be held between PCN, NAFDAC, DG, and PCN, and NIPRID, and all the government agencies that relate to pharmacy. We've called it Pharmaceutical Leadership Forum. It's not a constitutional issue because every once in a while, human nature can intervene, and you come to a meeting when you like, but now that it's a constitutional provision, it will put some pressure on all of us. So if NAFDAC and PCN are working together to create a proper regulatory environment that is promotive while ensuring that we maintain adequate regulation to protect the patient and maintain minimum international standards, but that the people are looking at the industry as a business setup. And that's why we have enlightened people like the NAFDAC, who has been on all sides of the spectrum, understands what manufacturers do, understands what business is, and then academia and regulation, and also PCN. So we are beginning to get to that level. Our academic pharmacists are raring to go. We have gotten the Nigerian Association of Industrial Pharmacists to provide money for the academic pharmacists to produce local products from scratch to finish, not imported, from local flora and fauna, so that we can have a truly Nigerian brand. So that is ongoing. Secondly, is the need to fund industry. The uncompetitiveness of the industry, as Clara made before, we're so brittle and little and easily run over by competition from Asia, from somewhere else. Very little. Now, the funding that is required is part of it is what CBN has started. Thank God for COVID. We must thank God for COVID, because this is what we have spoken for many years, that we needed a dedicated funding window for the industry. It's not just like any other industry. Healthcare is as should be given, if not more, the same attention we're giving to agriculture. We have plethora of products, concessions for agriculture, fine, but healthcare is also critical. So funding is an issue. The third one is what I was referring to in my earlier discussion, is that you cannot do all this until you have a proper philosophy, a governmental philosophy that will enable us to create an enable environment. Investments need to come into the country. The 100 billion is fine, but that is not up to what Pfizer spends in 1 year in research and development. So we need to create an environment that will attract, put some incentives on the ground that will help investment to flow into that sector. The moment we have investment flow into the sector, we have the regulatory collaboration, we have an effort which is being done to do local production, local research. Before, we were waiting for Madagascar, waiting for Malagasy, waiting for everybody to give us everything. Now some work is being done by Nigerian Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development. They are doing some local research to be able to produce from our own area of competitive or comparative advantage. So these are the things that I think that are going. And if we retain this constant dialogue, setting targets, following up, and praying that we'll have a government or somebody in healthcare, overseeing healthcare or in industry who has understanding, I'm sure we're going to make more progress.
Well, thank you. Taking that whole idea has
been a huge problem in the past. They have a small change in government. Any idea that's been, somehow built into some kind of consensus goes overboard. How do you work? And I'm going to turn to Dr. Mafo here. I mean, when a country has elders, one of the beauty of having elders is that elders can speak very forthrightly. And we have people like yourselves who have gone through the system, have seen decent days, have seen things go bad. Is there a possibility that a group of you who are elders can be a voice for saying this is what is wrong, this is what we must not allow to happen, whoever is Minister of Health or what government changes or anything, because that is the single biggest problem we have in Nigeria, that we don't have enough of a strong voice that says, no, you can't do this. So any bearer that comes along upturns everything. How can, elders of the profession like yourselves, maybe, I mean, it's retirement and it's all, find some network for helping our civil society put pressure on the system not to keep going astray?
Mr. Chairman, one thing I also want to say, or two, there is no decent country where drugs are sold in the market.
Yeah.
And this is something that happens in Nigeria. Open markets. If the regulatory agencies can be supported by government to ensure that these open markets for the sale of drugs is stopped. If you go to Onitsha market, if you go to Kano, if you go to Ariaria, if you go to Lagos, drugs are being sold in the open market. It is unhealthy. The people selling these drugs do not protect the quality of the drugs because the sun and everything, and some of them are even selling vaccines, and the vaccine should be in cold environment, and yet they are selling them in the sun. Then again, another issue that we should look at is this importation of drugs. Should every person qualified to import drugs be allowed to import drugs? I think that a system should be in place where selected, honest, committed people should be empowered to bring in the drugs as wholesale dealers and others buy from them. Because we do not have this limitation, you find traders who didn't even go to school, going to places like Pakistan, Vietnam, China, to order drugs with poor quality, and this creates problem. So one, let's stop selling drugs in the market for the health and the good of our people. Two, let's limit the number of people who go to import drugs. And if that is done, even the price of the drugs will go down because it will be a question of quantity and reduction in prices as a result of the bulk purchase. Instead of one individual going to buy a few quantity of drugs from one place and also having the opportunity to influence what is put in the drugs, which may not be for the good of the people. There are so many things that can be done, but the debate has started. I will urge that at the end of today, the DG NAFDAC, the Registrar of the Pharmacists Council, the PSN, with all its subunits, should meet and discuss this issue for the good of the greatest number of Nigerians. And more importantly, this policy somersault of the government should stop. Because when you have a policy today and tomorrow you change the policy, it does not do good for anybody, particularly for the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
When I was in the civil service, I negotiated with a number of pharmaceutical industries in Switzerland to come and establish here. But with the policy of government, what happened? These industries have been sold to Nigerians who do not even know how to manage pharmaceutical industry. And that creates a problem. Government should be sincere about the health and the well-being of Nigerians. We are talking about security.
Yes.
Yeah, security is important, but the health and welfare of Nigerians is important. And for them to be well, they need to have good drugs, because when they don't have good drugs, that also creates another problem, a lot of ill health. Government should encourage only those who are qualified by training and by knowledge to involve themselves in drug matters. Not traders, not traders. The traders may be rich, but they're only motivated by the profit they are going to make. You know, I left the service and I cannot establish one because I didn't have the money to establish. So, and I didn't want to establish and not run it properly. And I believe that a good pharmacist would be interested in running a business, pharmaceutical business, that will provide good health for the people of this country. The Federal Ministry of Health should be involved in these discussions so that often health is always treated like, oh, one of those things. You rather talk about agriculture. Yeah, agriculture will produce food for people to eat. If there are no drugs and there are no good quality drugs to treat the health of the people, then people will be going abroad for the treatment. And this has happened several times because people were not sure of the quality of the drugs they were consuming in Nigeria, and so had to go abroad to get the drugs they want. I think it's if we are serious, Professor Patutomi, you can lead this discussion of these bodies that I have talked about. We must be involved for the good of our people. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much. And I think that this, one of the issues I've been trying to see if we can ramp down to come out of this conversation is the industry getting together and having a workshop for people in enforcement generally, whether they are police, whatever law enforcement people, with state governments involved, to let people come to an understanding of why drugs should not be sold in open markets and those kinds of things. And then encourage a system of enforcement that is not seen as punitive, but is saving people's lives. Those same traders, if they want, can get more appropriate training and be absorbed into systems that can do things better. And this is really what the challenge must be for the industry at this time. But just moving forward very quickly, I'll return to Claire and then Jonathan will be very quickly. If the industry were to make an effort and visioning and setting a course, I know that Sam talked about this. So how would you structure those who would be involved in trying to vision and get all of society to buy into how the industry must travel so that everybody understands it? Not that there are so many different tongues pulling in different directions. How could the industry pull together stakeholders to vision a direction that will provide both the scale and play for growth? And then find international partners, by the way. There is private capital available in the world, which if it sees how the industry has organized itself and more seriousness in the whole place, will come in. to help this development take place?
Thank you, Professor Tony. Let me start by saying that I think crisis is one of those key accelerators of making innovation to thrive. And if I use COVID-19 as an example, we have seen the collective responsibility that both public and private sector has played in trying to tackle the challenges of COVID-19. If we take this as a case study and apply it to the pharmaceutical industry of Nigeria, I think we can definitely make a difference. You had the key private sector, and when I say private sector, it's not private health sector. It is the banking, telecoms, FMCGs. You had regulators, you had government, all at the table with one cause. And I think we've all seen that because we have been so fragmented, the tide has been out, and we've been exposed that healthcare is really at its lowest in emerging economies like our country. So one, of course, is that having not just a talk shop, but a workshop where we agree, all of us are at the table, and we all agree ahead of time that we're coming out with one objective, and that is to really reverse the negative trends, the negative numbers of our country. It is unacceptable, Prof, that we are the #1 country for under 5 mortality. We're the #2 country for when it comes to infant mortality and maternal death. It is unfortunate. And we can make a difference, but we do a lot of talking and no walking. So the likes of an NASG, the likes of the PSN, our regulators who are here on the call today, we have the Bankers Committee, we have telcos. I think representatives coming together under one umbrella with the key issue of health is wealth. We've seen what has happened out of COVID. And if we don't do something collectively, we're going to have an issue. Some clear examples, one I think is public-private partnerships with government. The government cannot do it alone. We in private sector, we tend to blame government for a lot. And government also does not engage private sector enough, and we need to get to that point of public-private partnership for enabling policies to open up the sector, to create disruptive businesses. For example, where we are right now with COVID, we need to have disruptive procurement and supply chain management. We do not have in country enough cold chain capacity for vaccines. We don't even have enough for PCR kits, but we can do it. We have organizations that have excess capacity and can be able to make a difference. We need to use the special economic zones. We have NEBZA right now that is specially set up under the government, but we in healthcare are not taking advantage of it. So we need to have special economic zones to drive and get local industry where it should be. But even if you have the best industries, if we don't have enabling policies where government buys Nigeria first, we have to buy Nigerian first. That should be the kind of option.
So all critical parts of that jigsaw, that government must, as the first line, patronize the Nigerian producers. But
absolutely. And the final point is that we need
just yesterday, I was telling the story of how, 25 or so years ago, I was chatting with Aliko Dangote on a Monday morning. I remember he had just come back from Brazil over the weekend, and he was carrying on about this Brazilian businessman that he met, who said to him, look, you never get rich by trading. You have to produce people's basic needs and all of that. So I then dragged one of my research assistants to write what was probably the first case study on Dangote back then. How can we encourage, facilitate a transition from people who have perhaps made money from importing, trading pharmaceuticals to actually become local producers? What would be the incentives that would facilitate this process?
Is that to me?
Well,
okay, thank you.
Okay, Prof, my response to that very question is that all hands must have to be on deck to get this country to whatever level that we so desire. Okay? There has to be a concerted effort both from the private sector and the government. We have a penchant in this country of having policy somersaults at the whims and caprices of whomever that is at the helm of affairs of any particular governmental agency. And it can never, and we never, ever get us anywhere. And it does seem to me too that the government in itself has to do so much to get individuals take responsibility for their actions or inactions. I give you an example. Today in Nigeria, we have port congestion. Whether you're manufacturing or importing, that's a different kettle of fish. The largest shipping company in the world, Maersk Line, has so declined getting vessels to Nigeria today because their vessels, over 50-something of them, are in Nigerian sea, and the vessels cannot get discharged. An empty container now from any part of the world, whether you're importing finished product or raw material or empty container from Asia, costs you $9,000. At the present exchange rate, your guess is as good as mine as what that translates into Naira. And there seems to me there's a very conflict of interest in the agencies at the ports. Somebody in NDLA wants to see paracetamol and says he doesn't understand what that is. Wants to take it to the lab and horse it under his kitty for the next 3 months. Raw material. So for somebody who is manufacturing here, your guess is as good as mine is what is going to go through. So what I'm trying to say in essence is this. For us to have a very robust economy that could give jobs to teeming population of our youths, we have to have a very vibrant industrial sector. Do we have it today? Of course not. My revered Dr. Mefo has said that companies in Nigeria are beset with a lot of problems because of deficit of infrastructure. See, for Central Bank of Nigeria, yes, I do agree, 100 billion naira is a peanut, like some of Habunwa said. That's a peanut compared to what Pfizer International sets aside for a particular project. For research, it's a peanut. But Central Bank of Nigeria here has money available with a pump and pageantry that's making available 100 billion naira to manufacturers in Nigeria. What that's going to achieve is very little or nothing as far as I'm concerned. And an average Nigerian manufacturer goes through a lot. Like we said here, even the water they use is not free. It's not cheap because it has to be treated. And business is never predicated on sentiments, any part of the world. There has to be return on investment. Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to say is this. There has to be a concerted effort driven by people that have the necessary vision for us to have a very vibrant industrial sector. Look at what India is doing today. Yeah. India today supplies pharmaceuticals, even Pakistan. Yeah, when we mention these nations, most of us treat them with disdain. Bangladesh, they have self-sufficiency in their drug needs. And we treat them with utmost disdain here, as if their products are rubbish, when we cannot do the same thing here. I am saying that we need a government that has the necessary wherewithal and have people. Let us excuse sentiments completely. To know if Mr. A or Mr. B comes from a particular geopolitical zone, to have him in an office. Let's get the best minds for which are readily available here to drive these processes, and we can get this nation to where we want it to be, and to command respect among Committee of Nations. Today, our passports is treated with utmost disdain. Why is this so? Because of the activity of very few Nigerians. I am very, very confident that with necessary support by all hands that are required to give that very necessary support, this country can produce whatever thing that it does need. But do we have the wherewithal? Do we have the zeal and the enthusiasm to do so? Talk is cheap, as far as I'm concerned. It's cheap in this very country. But what we need to do at any given time is let us get the best brains, no matter where they come from. Even if they come from the same village, I don't care. As a human being, all I want is, I want this nation to be better for myself and my generations yet unborn. That is what I want for myself, and the teeming population of Nigerians do also require them for themselves.
Very well spoken. Very well spoken. Thank you very much. We have to round up. And now I'll just ask Sam because it's far away, to take a closing swipe at some idea. If we needed to create a cluster just for pharmaceutical manufacture, if there was a project to create in somewhere, wherever it is, a 10-mile square area where you've got everything, the water, the infrastructure, all completely, and then get current players to locate factories within this cluster where they will not have any problem at all.
Yes.
How the kind of concept will play and encourage your members to move to that kind of cluster?
For sure, Prof. We're looking forward to that. Okay?
I thought you wanted.
Okay.
Prof, are you directing the question to me?
Oh, I thought you was asking me. Sam.
Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry, man. Sorry, please.
No problem, my brother. Pat, actually taking it out of us. There's something we've been working. The Nigerian Association of Industrial Pharmacies have been going around this country looking to set up pharmaceutical industrial parks. And just yesterday, while I'm here, I reviewed a memorandum of agreement between NAIP, PSN, and Ebonyi State. I think that we have gone to Ebonyi, we've gone to Ogun State, we've gone to Anambra State. Ebonyi is faster and perhaps a little bit more enthusiastic, and they have offered us a large hectare of land where we're going to work together. An SPV is being set up that will handle between NAIP, PSN, and other stakeholders and Ebonyi State government to create infrastructure. They're giving us the land. The infrastructure is going to be created, the marketing and the promotion for investment. So that's the first. We have other ones like we're saying we've been in Anambra. So that is already ongoing. And by January, we're going to
has begun to overcome their infrastructure challenges.
Yeah.
And we must begin to, in practical ways, do things like that.
Sure.
Okay.
That's what we're doing on that.
All right. So, well, thank you all so very much. We'll take a quick message, and then I will give closing. Unfortunately, because of the rush of many people today, we can't. Normally, we probably go until around 4:30, but we're going to stop now. I promise we'll end at 3:30, which we're overrunning.
Election go hard them. No, we last summer. Now you be this.
Yeah.
Every time before we dey see you, they waka like who know well. Now just you don't take and pay.
Before, malaria dey knock me gbasgbos. And then one day, I go pharmacy. I don't try 3 different malaria medicine. None work for me.
Have you tried Malact? Malact is the effective malaria medicine from May and Baker, makers of quality medicines for over 75 years. Malact contains a combination active drug called dihydroartemisinin piperacin, which keeps working in your body for up to 6 weeks, stopping the malaria parasite from knocking you down. This is why Malact is your control button against malaria.
Now 3 tablets I take every day for 3 days.
Now so Malact give malaria boy one time. Now my head be malaria. I go punch my own back.
Malact, your control button against malaria. Available in pharmacies near you.
There's something every mother has. It's something like a 6th sense, like knowing exactly when her baby's in danger. It doesn't matter where she is or what she's doing. She carries her family in her heart always and knows when all is not well, even when it appears like she might be wrong. A mother's instincts are hardly ever wrong. And she trusts M&B paracetamol, the red one, to save the day. With fast-acting and effective M&B paracetamol tablet, the red one, and its pleasant-tasting pineapple flavor syrup, she sends aches and pains far away from her family. Because mothers who know trust May and Baker for its over 70 years of quality experience. If symptoms persist after 2 days, consult your doctor. M&B paracetamol. Pain can't stop you.
Well, thank you, and thank you all so much. I want to begin by thanking Professor Mujiadeye I think that we started something today, and we're hoping that some of the things that you said will increase confidence and create the cooperation that's required to move forward. I believe in cooperation. I think that even in a competitive area, we can have co-opetition and grow very, very strongly as a result. I want to thank Dr. Mafo. We have invaded your time, and we hope that you will still keep looking back and providing that elders leadership. We want to thank all the other panelists, Sam Ugwabunwa, Claire Mache, Namdi Obi. Unfortunately, we had bandwidth problems with the Secretary Elijah Mohammed of the RCN. And thank you all so much for participating. This conversation continues in the new year, because there's no point in starting something that will not make a difference. We really must make this work for the sake of all of us. Thank you. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank
Happy
you.
Christmas.